Hello, members of North MC. This is your video on parliamentary procedure, and my name is Satish. I am your webmaster for this year. Now, parliamentary procedure is oftentimes referred to as ParliPro for short. So if you hear one of the officers tell you about ParliPro or use ParliPro in their daily life and conversation, do not be startled by it. It's just a short way to say parliamentary procedure. Now, why are we learning parliamentary procedure today? Well, parliamentary procedure is the foundation for debate in competitions, mocks, and meetings. When we attend conferences at Yale, Princeton, Columbia, and UPenn, you will notice that both your small committee sessions and full committee sessions follow parliamentary procedure to the T. In mocks, where people compete to attend these competitions, you will notice that we emulate the nature and the environment of a competition by observing parliamentary procedure here as well. And in meetings, when you're trying to learn how to become a better speaker, communicator, and when we, as officers, are trying to prepare you for the next mock or conference, you will be required to follow parliamentary procedure. Now, before we go into a lot of detail about this whole structure, let's get into some more information about debate jargon that you will see used often. Now, one is the floor. The floor is not the literal floor that you stand on. However, that is a good comparison for what it metaphorically means. Whenever the chair or one of your officers says you have the floor, it means that you have the ability to speak without being interrupted or being called out of order, meaning lack of discipline and interrupting an entire committee session. The floor is when you give your speech, is when you're recognized or when you're asking a question and you deserve all the respect from the chamber. So it's much like when you're standing up on the actual floor. Everyone has to pay attention to you and cannot do anything to you. Now, the second jargon is the chair. The chairs are the people who determine awards in your committees and determine who will be called on for the next speech, who will be allowed to propose an amendment, what motions pass through committee. They wield a lot of power inside of the committee session, and it's important that you always respect your chair. Inside of mocks, your chairs are going to be the officers. At competitions, they're going to be university students who are going to be evaluating you. Now, all this being said, let's go into the first point of parliamentary procedure, which is a point of personal privilege. You would simply raise your placard that has your name on it and say, point of personal privilege. And most often, this point of personal privilege will be granted. You use this if you need to get water, use the bathroom, or just move about the committee room. Now, this definition applies to conferences and actual mocks. However, in meetings, if you have to use the restroom or get water, you can just leave the room, but definitely notify an officer just so we know about your whereabouts. But at competitions and conferences, just to maintain professionalism, you will need to point for such a motion to be recognized. Now, let's move into the first major motion that you are going to be using often, which is the motion to open debate. Now, you use this motion to officially begin debate on a bill. You will use this every time a new session starts. So let's say you have a 4-hour first committee session. Most often, you do take a break in between the committee session. So you might debate for 2 hours and then someone might motion to recess for just 5 minutes so everyone can gather themselves. Now, after this break, you won't motion to open debate again, unless the chair wants you to. This is something that is subject to what the chair prefers. So if the chair does ask for a motion, you can motion to open debate. There's no harm in doing that. However, the first minute of your 4-hour session, that's when you will motion to open debate. That's when you set the floor for all of the speakers and the bills yet to come. Now, after that 4-hour session elapses and you go to your hotel rooms and come back the next day to another 3, 4, or even 5-hour session, then you will have to motion to open debate once again. But this is also sometimes up to the discretion of the chair. Sometimes chairs just directly go into another motion, which we will learn soon, which is motion to introduce. But if they ask for a motion, you can most definitely motion to open debate. and it's also a good way to show your involvement and understanding of parliamentary procedure during committee sessions. Now, an important distinction that we need to learn in Model Congress is structured versus unstructured debate. In structured debate, you have the following format: a 4-minute authorship speech. Now, this speech is given by the person who wrote the bill, and whatever time you don't fill up in those 4 minutes can be reserved for questions from the rest of your committee members. Then you have a 4-minute speech by anyone in the room who opposes the bill, 2-minute speech by anyone in the room who favors the bill, 2-minute speech by anyone in the room who opposes the bill. Now, during structured debate, all motions, such as a motion to amend, a motion to move to the previous question, are not recognized and are called out of order, which means they're not appropriate for the time being. You can simply do speeches during structured debate, and most often a point of personal privilege is entertained and is granted. During unstructured debate, this does not contain speeches typically, but is also used for other things like passing amendments on legislation and using moderated caucuses. Now, this is where you do have speeches, but in a moderated caucus, the difference between the structured debate and this caucus that you're in is that you can alter the length of speeches and the number of speakers. So typically, you would have someone motion for a moderated caucus of 4 speakers for 1-minute speaking time. You can change the speaking time and the amount of speakers up to how much effort you want. During the session, you can also move to vote on the bill. If there's no points or motions on the floor, typically we do move to speeches that are 2 minutes in length. Now, let's go into structured debate. The one major motion that I've already spoken to you about is motion to introduce. You motion to introduce when you want to introduce your bill and have it up for debate. Now, this is the only motion typically entertained during structured debate. There's no motion to give a speech or ask a question. Whenever someone yields to the chair, which is when you yield all of the time to no one else in the committee but to the chair, that means that no one can ask you questions, no one can, have any non-debatable technical questions on the legislation that are regarding the semantics of it asked and clarified. During the speech, once you're done, if you have time remaining, you can also yield to questions. Now, this means people can come up and ask you questions about the bill and why you chose to write it. And oftentimes these are pointed and argumentative questions laced with certain statistics as well. But apart from this, you typically don't do anything else in your structured debate session except give speeches and motion to introduce at the very beginning. Now, do not make the mistake, and I've already mentioned this, to motion to give a speech or ask a question. It looks like you're a novice delegate oftentimes when you do this, and it's quite a simple mistake that many of us can avoid. So, if you want to give a speech or just ask a question, the chair will ask, all those willing to give speeches, please raise your placard. All those with questions for the speaker, please raise your placard, and simply do that. Raise your placard. Now, after this motion is done, you move into debate or take a vote on which bill you want to debate first. Now, I know I spoke to you about the different structures and the way in which you speak after a motion to introduce has been proposed. But many times you'll find that more than one person wants to introduce their bill at the same time, which means the committee, or in case of mocks, the officers, must choose which bill to debate first. During competitions, the chair will not choose. It will be up to the discretion of the committee. During this time, a simple majority vote for a legislation will help make sure that legislation is debated. Now let's move on to unstructured debate. At this point in time, what has happened is you have given a 4-minute authorship speech, a 4-minute con, a 2-minute pro, or a 2-minute con. And this can be from anyone in the chamber, and all of these speeches are typically given by different people. During unstructured debate, the rules are quite simple. You can motion to amend, which requires a second. A second when someone supports your motion just by raising their placard and saying second. And then after there's a second, then you move to vote on whether to consider the amendment or not, and the author can deem it friendly or unfriendly. So if they deem it friendly, what that means is that it is automatically incorporated into the bill. This means that there needs to be zero debate on the amendment itself. If it's unfriendly, you need a majority vote in order for it to be considered for debate. Yes, it doesn't automatically get included in the bill. You need to debate it first. Next, you have a motion to move to the previous question. This can be quite tricky, so bear with me. After you motion to move to the previous question, you need a second. Now, when this happens, it typically is when debate is done on a legislation, and previous question means moving to vote on a bill. After you get a second for your previous question motion, you need a majority to affirm that motion. Now, once the majority affirms the motion, that's not voting on the bill. That's voting on whether you want to go ahead and contain and take a vote on the bill. So you vote to vote first. And after that, the chair will ask all those in favor, all those opposed, and all those abstaining. Abstaining is when you're neither in favor nor opposed. Next, you have a motion for a moderated caucus, which I've already covered before, which also requires a second and a majority. Then, you have points. Points are different from motions, which means that most often they do not require a second or majority. A point of inquiry is when you want the chair to search something up on Google or other types of internet in order to gain information for a speech. You don't have to use this at all. It's actually preferred if you don't, since it shows you have good knowledge and grasp over what you're talking about. But oftentimes it's used to corroborate a statistic that may seem a bit strange during a committee session. Next, you have a point of parliamentary procedure or a point of order. This is used in order to question whether something that has happened is truly following parliamentary procedure and is oftentimes used to correct the chair, but it should not be used in excess. The Roberts Rules of Order, which I spoke to you about during the beginning of today's video, forms the basis for all types of parliamentary procedure used in Model Congress. If you have any questions, you can contact the officer board or simply consult this book to gain more information. Thank you so much. We hope that this brief introduction to parliamentary procedure was helpful. You will find on the website that we also have a big manual with additional motions and more details in case you want a handy guide. Thank you so much for your time. We hope to see you at a meeting in the future. Have a wonderful day and good luck.